That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Resurrection, the sophomore film directed by Andrew Semans, which premiered at the 2022 Sundance Film Festival and is being released courtesy of IFC Films June 29th, 2022. Not to be confused with Daniel Petrie's 1980 film Resurrection, which features one of my favorite Ellen Burstyn performances.
This director's first film?
Was back in 2012, a film called Nancy Please, which I also remember quite liking, and I think I might have reviewed that back then, starring Eleanor Hendricks as the titular Nancy, a woman who owns a copy of her ex-roommate's Little Dorrit, which happens to kind of unwind them.
This was a strange little film. It's a psycho drama, I guess.
Yeah. It's I think you kind of have to classify it as a psychological thriller. Although I didn't find it very thrilling, I found it kind of intensely interesting, and there were a lot of things I really liked about it. But I don't know how it's filled with dread in kind of that Pinteresque way, though.
So the basic story. The main character, what's her name?
Margaret.
Played by?
Rebecca Hall.
Okay. Margaret is like a 40-year-old lady. She's a single mom. She has a daughter who will be turning 18 in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. She lives in New York. She has a really lovely place to live. She works, I think, in like biogenetics. So she has a sweet little gig going on. And one day she is at a conference and sees a man played by Tim Roth, and is immediately triggered. Like she has a violent reaction, like runs out of this conference, and it seems like her life is turned upside down. We find out that man, Tim Roth, 20 years prior,
22 years,
had like met her while she was on a trip with her family, so she was only 18, and he kind of like, as she tells it, manipulated her family into allowing him to sort of enjoy like the summer with her. He whisks her away and basically spends a period of time like brainwashing her, humiliating her, ultimately getting her pregnant. Against his wishes, she has the baby. And then one day she comes home, the baby's gone, and he tells her he ate her baby. So of course, she's devastated. She ends up getting away from him. So she only spent a short time with him. And then moves on and then, obviously creates a life for herself, meets someone, has this baby who is now her daughter. So Tim Roth has come back into her life because he wants to start playing these games again. So he starts like getting into her head, making her do like, he's trying to control her through humiliation and suggestion. So examples would be like he convinces her to walk every day to work barefoot, like in the city. He has her going like from like in the midnight hours for hours, like in a park somewhere, holding like a really awkward like physical position, a stress position.
And these are called kindnesses.
Yeah, we can get to that. Mm-hmm. But it culminates with him convincing her that you need to come to my hotel room if you want to see your son, because he keeps telling her, your son, our baby, is inside of me.
Ben. Mm-hmm.
The baby's name is Ben. It's a boy. He's inside of me. And if you want to see him, you need to come to my hotel room. She shows up. He's still on his bullshit. She kills him. She brings knives, kills him, disembowels him, pulls out his intestines, and guess what we find? That damn baby. Obviously, it's all in her head. A portion of it's in her head. And the final scene is now she's back home. It's important to know the relationship with her daughter throughout the film becomes very strained up to the daughter, like, leaving the house. But we see, like, her daughter's back home. The daughter says, like, you're a good mother. Like, I'm happy with you.
I'm not afraid anymore.
I'm not afraid anymore. Because the mom's main intention was to protect her daughter. And then we see Rebecca Hall's character holding the baby, like she's happy, and then we zoom in for the final shot, which is her face looking terrified. Like clearly this is all in her head. The end. This shit was crazy, but I think it's well done, well acted. There's a lot to talk about, so in that way I think it's effective.
I really liked it. It made me think of a whole bunch of reference points, of course, but the subtext about human behavior, I think, are very compelling. And Rebecca Hall's performance, compared to her recent directorial debut with Passing and in a performance in The Night House last year, I mean, I'm very impressed.
The Night House, is that with the duplicate house?
Yes.
She's the main lady in that? Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
She's in a ton of stuff. She's been around.
The film opens with her, so she has like a little, fuck buddy, who's this guy.
Peter, played by Michael Esper.
He's married, but that doesn't stop him. So the very opening scene is her telling him like about a drawing, asking him if he draws and saying that she draws. We never see this drawing, but I'm curious what you think. Like, what does a drawing have to do with anything?
The drawing is a representation of something from her past. It's something she gave up that was very much a part of her life with David, the Tim Roth character, because when he met her, she was kind of obsessively drawing. She would get lost for hours doing it, and that's something that I think she locked away with this trauma, and that's what that's representative of. And also there's a couple other ominous moments that up to this I thought was a very impressive, like 10-minute monologue where the daughter is injured while out drunk bike riding with her friend, and he suggests that he might have had something to do with that. Even before that, the daughter finds this human tooth in her wallet. And I think that is also how we connect memories to objects, and that also I think is putting her mind of this kind of like how the child Ben that was eaten, all that was left behind of him were 2 fingers, and this memory associated with body objects, I think as well, I think is all part of the kind of underlying motifs.
Okay, you just went through half my notes. But
oh, sorry.
Well, what else do you want to say?
No, there was just all kinds of things that I really liked about it. I mean, it's gonzo, weird, and crazy, and it's been compared to, I know a couple critics compared it to Zulawski's Possession, which of course is a favorite film of mine, and I don't think it's quite at something like that level, but this notion of how we become obsessed, and Margaret as somebody that, what I was moved by with Rebecca Hall's performance in this character. She's clearly somebody that has learned that she is alone with herself and only has herself to depend upon. So in dealing with this trauma, she's put up all these walls, which has helped kind of create this thing that couples do, is have their own private universe. And these two had their own kind of weird this own weird universe where the story of this baby being eaten and kept inside the stomach is so ridiculous. But, she's not able to kind of relay this sense of herself to anyone else, and so they've created their own normalcy, their own bubble. So I like that she's reacting in a way and has lived her life in a way that she's only had herself to depend upon, and sharing that with anybody is a weakness, because there's all of these things. It opens with her talking to a coworker named Gwyn, like an intern or something, and she's kind of, you asked if Rebecca Hall's character was a therapist initially, because she is kind of giving her advice about boyfriend problems and this asshole this girl is dating. And then when push comes to shove and this young woman is called upon to do the same thing, do a solid for her, she can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was reminded, she has a nightmare early on where she opens the oven and there's this baby burning inside of it, which reminded me of what happens to that Zuni fetish doll in Trilogy of Terror.
Oh, God.
But this thing about things in the air and the things returning to us and reintegrating themselves into our lives, I think, I like. It sounds ridiculous, but Tim Roth's thing about how Ben is inside me living, I think is an allusion to Greek mythology, because Cronus, who's father time, had a habit of eating all his children because he was afraid they would overthrow him, and then of course time consuming everybody. I think weaves itself in there interestingly. And if you notice in that final scuffle between the two of them, when she has the knives taped to her, do you remember she cuts his Achilles heel?
Yes.
Like this thing about weak spots and vulnerabilities. I just think that there are so many smart, weird, subtle things in the film that having watched it a second time, I was even able to pick up on more easily.
Sure.
Once you get past, because if you want to talk about the monologue, because I know you didn't like it, but I think that it's gonzo, but I think her performance is so good in it. But I think we're so distracted by the strangeness that comes out of it.
I I didn't think the monologue was bad. I think it's well performed. It's just a strange. I think, like, in real life, like, witnessing someone who, this character represents a person who has trauma, hasn't processed it, has tucked it away, now it's reignited. And it's just, like, in real life, frustrating to witness someone being so unreasonable. Like, she doesn't want to communicate with her daughter, so the daughter's mad. I think the daughter's unreasonably upset so quickly. We don't get a lot of background on their relationship. It would seem that it's fine. So I was a little frustrated with that, like how quickly the daughter just gives up on her mom. But I think it's telling the basic story, it sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't play like that. It does feel well constructed, and I think there is a lot embedded in the story that makes for a good conversation.
I think what's interesting about the daughter too is this other what parents do to protect their children because of their own abuses they've went through. And she, in that monologue, she talks about how her own parents, these oblivious biologists who were kind of hippy dippy, ignored what their daughter might have been going through. So she was, kind of refusing to do that for her own. Also not realizing that her overprotectiveness of her name's Abbie, is causing her to spiral out of control with David returning to her life, ironically. But because of that, when parents, it's like, when you grow up poor and then you decide to spoil your kids and then your kids are really, not very thankful adults and are kind of lazy. It's that kind of, I read that relationship as that kind of dynamic. Like her daughter can't appreciate what her mother's gone through because her mother's not communicating with her either.
Right. Probably the thing that hit me the most was at the end because Tim Roth's character, just comes back and he's back on his bullshit. And when they're in the hotel room right before she kills his ass, he's just being very bold, like thinking that he has control over her. And I just thought, like, that, I can very much relate to that. Like, people thinking that they can just continue with their bullshit and eventually people get tired. And everyone has a breaking point. And this lady, I think that's what this represents. So in that regard, I don't think this film is, like, ridiculous. I think it should, it's not a fun watch per se. I think I'd have to be in the mood.
I think you had a hard time getting into the first hour, as you said, which I agree with, but I think it's doing a lot of
but it's not poorly
deliberate
done.
work.
It's not poorly done. I just think it's one of those things that a person has to be prepared for. Like, it's an odd bird and it's going to take you somewhere you don't really expect. But maybe be comfortable wherever you're sitting and have your little cold beverage next to you.
But the Rebecca Hall performance very much, I probably also responded very well. Reminded me of Sigourney Weaver in something like Death and the Maiden, and these long, grueling monologues about terrible things happening to people and how they've not really dealt with it. And our initial conversation after this film was also, about how easy it is. We say we've moved on from trauma, that we've worked through something, but as you had said, like, nobody ever really tests that.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of situation we all find ourselves in where, we go through things and then we move past and we think we've processed them, but the reality is, like, we don't really ever test those boundaries, right? Like, I don't know. If you were bit by a dog once and then you just avoid dogs, it's like, well, you don't know how you'd react if you get bit by a dog again. So I think it's really interesting to watch this character just devolve.
Very quickly.
But I think it makes sense. Like, initially it's like, wow, she is really, like, just... But it does make sense.
It does, because she's able to say, like, I know Ben is dead, stop saying that, but you can almost, like, see the click in her brain when Tim Roth says, I think I need you to do me a kindness. And she goes, well, I know that's what I need to do to get you to go away, so I'm going to do it, but then that's the exact wrong thing to do. Yeah.
Also, the whole kindness thing. So him making her do these humiliating, controlling tasks, or tasks that are intended to control her, he calls them kindnesses, which I think is funny because I think a lot of times
what we call love.
Well, I was going to say sometimes I'm told that I'm, like, mean and nasty in, like, a funny way because I do things that might be considered, like, mean and nasty, but really it's me trying to, like, advocate for myself in my mind. Mm-hmm. So I think it's funny that in this story the opposite is true. Like, she's being asked to clearly do things that are manipulative. Mm-hmm. And like it's a kindness, like you succumbing to my wishes and
To his
allowing me
will.
to control you is kindness. But then when I try to exact some agency over myself, I'm mean and nasty. So I mean, it's just very interesting, like the games we all play and the situations we find ourselves in and the trauma we all experience and how those things get brought up, how we don't process them. Yeah, this movie feels like the filmmaker, the story writer, they're not the same person.
Yeah, Andrew
they are.
Semans. Mhm.
This person clearly had a story they wanted to tell, and it almost feels like they worked in reverse. Like, how do I have to play these? Like, it was like a chess game. Like, how do I have to orient these characters to tell the story I want to tell? So in that regard, it doesn't feel very organic to me. It feels more like this movie is a message about trauma and all the things related to it. And so the characters don't feel like real people, but they're not supposed to. Like, it makes sense to me.
Sure.
So I think it's very well done. Did I enjoy sitting there watching that? No. But I still think it's a good movie, and I would recommend it. It's just not like if you're looking for like it's probably going to be in the horror section. So then if you're,
Which I don't think it feels.
I think you'd be disappointed.
It feels like more like a well done melodrama that has kind of sinister undertones.
Yeah, if you're looking for it, because I'm sure, if it's on Amazon and it's like psych thriller, I feel like it still doesn't quite fit that. So yeah, it feels like just a strange drama.
But that's kind of like the dark side of something like Stephen Shane's Secretary. I also was struck by this notion of this dead child or this imaginary child is something that's linking this couple in a very toxic way, as something like George and Martha, Liz Taylor and Dick Burton and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, who of course go through all these motions of having this child that doesn't exist. Very much feels in a similar vein to that. I really liked how it was shot as well by Wyatt Garfield, who shot Jonas Carpignano's Mediterranea, as well as Miguel Arteta's Beatrice at Dinner. The score I also like by John Williams, who did Possessor, Titan, and Kill List. You kept saying that Tim Roth, I think he's much less difficult to like, and I'm not entirely sure I love what he's doing with his performance, but he seems almost like an ogre from a fairy tale.
I thought he worked because I was imagining him 22 years ago. And he probably wasn't cute. He's probably, he's smaller than her. So he's probably like this puny guy who thought that and then Rebecca Hall's a beautiful woman. And of course, 22 years, ago was even popping more. So I think it makes sense that I could see his character do, because then it's like, well, what's his motivation? Why is he doing this? Well, why does anyone want to control someone? Like it doesn't always make sense. It's just like they want what they want, how they want it, and the games people play. And it could be something as little as what the average couple does to each other, subconsciously trying to control each other because it's just, that's what it's like to live with someone, right? But then in that case, it's so extreme for such a short amount of time. It's so deliberate. It just makes you hungry for like, why did he do this? But then seeing him, my impression was he's sick and
yeah, he is,
and this beautiful woman, like this young girl, because he's probably like 10 years older than her minimum. So he was like a whole ass adult chasing this 18, 19-year-old. So
and that was his only way to keep control of
they
her.
get control of her. So
and the baby was something that would have took her away from him.
And again, it does feel like, I could go on and on about it, but I just think about being 18 and then interacting with people who were 30, 35, 40, and the little subtle things people do, maybe not consciously, but the things they do and say in an effort to sort of make you feel like you need them and that they know better, and then you start acting and behaving in a certain way. And we all do that in all of our relationships of all kinds. So, but at a much different level, right? So this movie just feels like to the max. This man convinced you he ate your damn baby, which is like, did he? Because
I like that he convinced her that she could hear the baby crying.
Well, before that, she as a 19-year-old who's like a new mother, she leaves, comes back home, and this fool presents to her two baby fingers, like two severed fingers, and says, "That's all that's left of your baby. I ate the rest." And it's like he really convinced her he ate her baby. Because it's like, I'm sure he didn't eat the damn baby.
No.
So it's like, all that grooming and manipulation and brainwashing led her to a place where she really did think, when reality is like that baby might be buried wherever the hell they were staying or something.
Right, which probably was. But again, the importance of these private bubbles that we can build for ourselves when we don't kind of have any commiseration with anyone else to be like, whoa, that's crazy. Like like how the film opens with her telling this girl, like, him doing that to you is manipulating you. You're strong, blah, blah, blah. And no one is there to tell that to her. And you can see just very clearly, she wants to know in her last scene with Gwyn, like, did I help? Was I able to help? But no, there's no one there to help her, which I think is what's so resonant about
That's a really effective message of, we keep things to ourselves. And, some of it is being socially appropriate and having boundaries, right? We can't just, every person we meet, tell them all our shit. But I think there is a line, and I think many of us stay behind that line in a way that's not healthy. And her character is like the epitome of that.
Well, that long monologue where it's like, she hasn't told anybody, and she says you should be honored. But it comes out like there's no rational way to respond to a story like that.
Right.
Especially for this young woman.
Who really just wants a letter of recommendation.
Right. But it's like, that's the danger of it. But she has made it seem like that is a positive, that she hasn't had to share it with anybody.
Yeah, because I think many of us keep things to ourselves because we don't want to seem weak or fragile, unstable, whatever. But the reality is, when we hold it in, when it finally does come out, that's when you actually do seem crazy. So it's so important to sort of have people, whether it's someone you have to pay to listen to you or otherwise. So yeah, it does a lot of things really well. What would you give this movie?
Oh, I wanted to bring up one last thing.
Okay, we're getting long now.
This is a film worth talking about, I think. Unlike many things we've seen lately. But the scene where she disembowels him, basically, very much reminded me of kind of a gender reversal on Inside with Beatrice Dahl, which of course I appreciate. I would give it 3.5.
I originally said I would give it 3.5 as well. I think it's very good. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.